Water tells a unique story, which comes to life in every drop and becomes reality in rivers and basins of our land. In this scenario, farmers become key players, driving projects that transform water management in their communities. In a world marked by climate crisis and water scarcity, at Quilimo, we are committed to reshaping the value of water in food production, guiding stakeholders and farmers towards a world where water availability is a reality for everyone. Quilimo is action. We connect stakeholders investing in water security with farmers who care for water in the world's most critical watersheds, optimizing water use in agricultural production and supporting companies on their path to becoming water positive. We act collectively to build a future where water is available for communities, ecosystems, and economic development. At Quilimo, we lead the way towards a water-positive future, where water is a driving force for development and well-being. Join this movement. Quilimo. Water tells a unique story, which comes to life in every drop and becomes reality in rivers and basins of our land. In this scenario, farmers become key players, driving projects that transform water management in their communities. In a world marked by climate crisis and water scarcity, at Quilimo, we are committed to reshaping the value of water in food production, guiding stakeholders and farmers towards a world where water availability is a reality for everyone. Quilimo is action. We connect stakeholders investing in water security with farmers who care for water in the world's most critical watersheds, optimizing water use in agricultural production and supporting companies on their path to becoming water positive. We act collectively to build a future where water is available for communities, ecosystems, and economic development. At Quilimo, we lead the way towards a water-positive future, where water is a driving force for development and well-being. Join this movement. Quilimo.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming to this webinar to share with us some ideas. My name is Andrea Ramos, and I will be the host during the next hour. I am the VP of Climate Adaptation in Quilimo. I don't think I need to present Quilimo because you have already watched our video. And I am based in Santiago de Chile, which both with Kim and Kath having already talking about a very nice city, but also based in one of the most stressful basins around the world. So the topic that we are going to address today, it really worries me in a personal sense. So thank you so much, Kath and Kimberly, for being here today. If you want to turn on your cameras, so we can start this conversation. We are going to be talking today about your amazing experiences working in these enormous challenges that we have as region, how to address collective action in this watershed or water security in the most stressful basins around the continent. So thank you so much for being with us. And I would start with Kimberly. Kim, if you want to present yourself, and please give us some context of this amazing initiative that you are leading today.
Great. Well, thank you so much for inviting me to speak. I'd love to talk about watersheds and in particular about the Mississippi River watershed. Mississippi River watershed is a large basin in the central part of the United States. In fact, it is the fourth largest watershed in the world, and that's by area, volume, and length. It's in the top 10 of all of them, but in area, the fourth largest in the world. It has a large agricultural footprint and major U.S. cities, home to many millions of people and many water issues to address. I run an organization called America's Watershed Initiative, which is a nonprofit organization that works to develop science and data to inform decision makers and looks for collective action across many types of partners.
Great, thank you so much. What's the hydrological context of the Mississippi River? I know that involves more than one state. It's in every state the same situation, or we have bigger challenges upside the river, downside the river?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, it's a very large watershed, so we have differences. To the west, we have a lot more drought issues. To the east, we're a water-rich part of the country. But I'd say overall, one of the biggest issues, two big issues in the Mississippi River. One is nutrient pollution. That pollution is coming from wastewater, runoff, fertilizer, manure, and causing a lot of problems, not only in the rivers themselves, but also in the Gulf of Mexico, where there is a large dead zone, which really impacts both tourism and marine, the seafood industry. It's where 42% of the US's seafood comes from. So we have those water pollution problems, particularly with nutrient pollution watershed wide. And then the other hydrological aspect, which you were alluding to, is the amount of water. In many places in the watershed, we're seeing more and more flooding. In fact, I just did a quick look this morning, and there have been 11 significant floods in the last 30 years in this basin, causing billion with a B, billions of dollars of damage in this watershed. And those rainfall events are coming both through hurricanes and through just regular thunderstorms. So we're seeing a lot more flooding basin wide. And at the same exact time, we're also seeing more droughts. Drought is more prevalent in the western part of our basin, which includes some of the upper Midwest states, even all the way over to Montana as part of our basin. But even in the lower basin, we have seen 3 significant droughts which impact transport of agricultural goods and services, impacts drinking water, especially for the city of New Orleans. And that combination of floods and droughts, even in the same year, is something we have not experienced in this basin until fairly recently.
Okay, okay. I am really excited following this initiative because I think it's the way that the basin's issues or challenges need to be addressed. But it's really challenging because, for example, in our case, we work with the minor basins, which is the small part of the basin, which is already challenging. And I can imagine if you're considering a lot of states, different situation, different contexts, different stakeholders. I think that the work that you are doing, if you could success on this initiative, it will be an example for the world. So thank you for that work, and we are following that from very close. And on the other hand, I have Kath with me. Kath is from the Sea Water Monday. And Kath, you from the Sea Water Monday have been pushing these collective action projects and this work towards a lot of stakeholders as you started. Can you tell us more about your organization and how these collective action projects are suggested to be worked from your organization?
Certainly, and I'll just start. Well, first off, thank you for having me here, and hello everyone coming in through the chats from around the world, it looks like. But for those not familiar with the CO Water Mandate, we are a commitment platform in which companies are agreeing to implement core elements of water stewardship. That's going to include direct operations across their supply chains, watershed management, collective action being one of those commitments as well, public policy, transparency and community engagement. And we really believe in the importance of having that public commitment. So that is at its core what the CEO Water Mandate is about. It was originally implemented in 2007, and it's between the UN Global Compact, so we are UN related, and a partnership with a California-based research institute called the Pacific Institute. You can kind of see both of them behind me on my screen here. We have a lot of names. But again, the intersection between the UN Global Compact and the Pacific Institute is this CEO water mandate. And kind of the operationalizing branch or the leadership, I would say, group of the CEO water mandate and how to achieve really those commitments is called the Water Resilience Coalition, or the WRC, and that's specifically where I work. And that's an industry-led, CEO-led initiative that's focusing on how, like I just said, the corporates can operationalize those commitments. And it's most relevant, I would say that group is most relevant to what I'll be drawing on today, what we'll be talking about, and what brought me to meet Kim in our work specifically in collective actions. And actually, just goodness, a year ago or so, the WRC and about 50 leading companies and their partners actually released this shared vision. For maybe some of you remember the 2023 UN Water Conference, it was at that. And that vision was to achieve positive water impact in a portfolio of 100 water-stressed basins across the world. So Andrea mentioned that Mississippi is one of these, or the larger Mississippi River Basin. But I do get to work all over the world, which is a beautiful opportunity. And like Andrea was saying too, the difference being these are larger hydroshed levels. So thinking like the Colorado being the size of one, the Godavari, if you're familiar in India. And well, even just there's actually 5 of them that make up the larger Mississippi River Basin. So like the lower Mississippi River Basin would be one of those 100 water stress basins in our portfolio. And I will just the final note there, the dimensions of water stress that we are particularly interested in are quality, quantity, and then also WASH. So enabling WASH for individuals across all of those basins is what WASH, water, sanitation, and hygiene, for those unfamiliar with the acronym. All right, forgive me, the large introduction, but that's what
no, that's great. That's great. And I also encourage people that is listening to us to go to that list of the 100 basins that you have in your website, because for a climate tech like us that are always looking where to grow and where to address the most challenges or the biggest challenges of the region, it's great because you already did the scientific work of which are the basins that need it the most. So I really encourage people to go there. We have people from all around the world today. I'm so happy. And a lot of people from Mexico, which is good because we have big challenges in Mexico. And Kath, I would like you to tell us more about this methodology or tool that you have, which is the Net Positive Water Impact. Can you tell us more about it?
Sure, although I do have colleagues that work full time on that, and certainly if you have more questions, would love to point you that way. We have guidance documents and that are constantly in iteration, I would say too. And what's really neat about this work is that it is very collaborative. There's constant feedback loops and reviews of what the methodology is. But let me give an overview nonetheless. It is also an approach, I would say, a water stewardship approach and commitment that companies make to really contribute to watershed resilience in a way that's going to go beyond the company's impact on water stress in a basin. And we do focus or encourage that NPWI, this net positive water impact, be prioritizing the water stress basin. So the most need locations where your companies are present. It's considering those 3 dimensions of water stress that I brought up earlier, the quality, quantity, and accessibility. And then it also is multi-scalar, so it's 3 pillars. Just to talk through kind of quickly, you've got avoiding and reducing operational impacts. So that's addressing kind of your site level, the fraction of the operational footprint of your business that's contributing to the availability and quality and accessibility challenges in that particular basin. And then pillar 2, that's a replenishment and restoring of the operational footprint. So balancing after you've done the reduction, it's the rebalancing of the site's remaining operational footprint in that basin. Again, always focusing one at a time. So that location in particular. And then the final pillar, that third pillar, is the collaborating to deliver measurable basin outcomes. And what we mean by that, contributing to good water governance, sustainable, the water balance of the overall basin. So contributions toward that beyond your own operational balance. So I don't know if that's starting to get closer, but let's say a company would be using this approach as part of their stewardship portfolio. So if a company in the Mississippi River Basin, for example, would be taking action again to avoid and reduce the fractions of their operational impacts for all of their sites in the Mississippi River Basin, then it's going to be looking for ways to balance its remaining operational footprint through maybe some interventions that are related to replenishment and restoration. And then the pillar 3, again, looking beyond their own private water balance, tapping into and thinking about the shared risks of the basin and looking for collective action type of investment opportunities.
Do you have any case or example in which this methodology it's being advanced apply, or is it still at the beginning in all the basins that you are working?
I think there's maybe a couple of different ways I could answer that. We do have 7 pilot companies, so we've been kind of, you could take it from the company perspective, that companies that are or have made this commitment and are looking to actually track and progress against those 3 pillars, and a strategy, a stewardship strategy that picks their priority basins by stress levels, and looks to address each of those scales and all 3 of those dimensions of water stress. So I think that there's some nice case studies from the corporate level, but then let's see. I would say that you would, in what we're trying to do in each basin, is to support companies in getting to advance across those 3 basins, those 3 pillars.
And it takes time. Yeah. We like it or not, it really takes time. So I'm glad you are in the process. Thank you, Kath.
Yes, and lots of case study in document that have been documented as well, certainly, for those companies.
Great. Kim, and collective action sounds amazing when we talk about it, but then when we go to the territory, it's not that easy, because the stakeholder has different interests, challenges, they want their piece of the cake. How has been your experience? And try to be honest, not politically correct, but how has been your experience year to date about involving those stakeholders? It's any of them that are easier to get into rather than others? What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, you are exactly right. It is a big, messy, exciting place to work. So let me tell you a little bit about existing structures in our watershed. So again, we have 5 large basins. Each of those sub-basins, which are huge in and of themselves, so the upper Mississippi, lower Mississippi, Missouri, Arkansas, red, white, we lump together, and the Ohio. Those are our sub-basins. Each of those 5 sub-basins have some kind of structure. Some of them have very well organized structure that rests in state governments. So the governors of those states have said, we in the upper Mississippi River Basin want to get together and we want to work on these issues together. And we're going to set up a structure and we're going to give it lots of money. In the lower basin, the states have said, we don't have any structure, but if you in my state want to come to meetings and voluntarily participate, go for it. But we're not going to give you any money or any specific support to do that. And I won't go through each of the 5, but if I did, every single structure would be different, and it would have different players, different funding sources, different accountability. So that's just at the basin scale. Then you layer on our federal government employees, of which we have 8 federal agencies, from the Department of Agriculture pretty clear what they do. Department of Transportation, pretty clear. But we have what's called the Army Corps of Engineers, which is really the biggest water management agency out there, as well as our Environmental Protection Agency that talks about how the water, how healthy the water is. Then our agencies that deal with fish and wildlife protections. So you layer on all that complexity, then you layer on all the complexity of the corporate sector, nonprofit organizations, academics, and you have a pretty messy system. So what we decided to do to try to put some order to all that, all those entities doing different things in different ways is we posed the question, wouldn't it be better to have some kind of organized structure, a single set of goals we were all working towards, and an organizational structure that supported all of you in your current institutions, but in working together. So we've been at that work for about 2 years now.
Okay.
We have a coordinated, a starter set of goals and actions that we all want to pursue together. And we've been really careful to make sure those goals align. So if I'm working for a state or a federal government or a corporation, I can see myself in all of those goals. So that's been step one, get the underlying goals right.
And you already
Then
have that, you said?
a draft. We have a draft that we'll be presenting actually in December. And then the next step will be what will be the organizational structure that will support deployment on those goals. So that's just a lay of the land. Now to get to your actual question of how challenging has it been, I think I'll say one of our biggest challenges is just to get people to think like a watershed. I'm guessing most of the people on this call already think like that naturally. So sometimes it's hard to imagine that people don't even know what a watershed, many of your partners don't even know what a watershed is.
Yes.
They don't know how it functions.
We also need to educate people about this. Yes.
Absolutely. So language is key. The terms you use, having shared language around those terms, even just a silly, well, it may seem silly, I shouldn't call it silly, even though from a hydrologic standpoint, the Ohio River Basin is a sub-basin of the Mississippi. They don't like to be called a sub-basin. They are really proud of the work they're doing in the Ohio Basin. So we just had to even though it pains us as hydrologists and ecologists to not use scientific terms, we got to use terms that bring people in. So
you need to be like someone that articulates perfect every demand.
Yep. So language, meeting people where they are, acknowledging existing structures and their relevance, making sure people are seen in their goals, in all your goals, and making sure you're clearly communicating, if I'm going to take the time and effort to participate in this, what am I going to get out of it? And you got to make sure that there is an outcome that they will really get something out of it. So I'd say all of those points have been barriers along the way and probably will continue to be barriers. So it hasn't been smooth sailing, but those are kind of my key lessons, some of the key lessons learned.
And I think that one of the most important things is to give not maybe the biggest steps at all, but secure steps. Because I think that we are working with a topic that once you break the trust, it's so hard to recover it. So I'm glad you took 2 years to write a draft and then maybe one more to build the structure, but you are considering all the voices. I think that that's something very important. And we're not used to, because we want things as fast as possible. And in this topic, I think that this is very, very dangerous. Just one more question, Kim, because I think it's very connected to some things that you just said. You in the United States have just lived a very big change at the political atmosphere, and we are all aware of that. But it's something that in Latin America we live all the time, and our institutions are not as strong as the United States. So how that do you think is going to go through the water thing? Do you think this is going to change a lot of things of the work that you're doing, or you trust on the institutions that you have and it shouldn't?
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say that's an understatement that we've gone through a big thing. Uh, yeah, well, it's a big change is coming, and we in knowing, 2 years ago, we already knew an election was coming, and it was probably going to be a challenging election, no matter how it came out, because the country has a lot of divisions and not a lot of good communication across those divisions. So we purposely set ourselves up to make sure we invited everybody to come to the discussion, because unless we had everybody, we were subject to um, a lot more impact with a change in our president. So when I say everybody in the U.S., and I'm guessing around the world, this may be true as well. Farmers talking to people in conservation, engineers talking to ecologists. Sometimes those conversations just don't happen. And so we were really purposeful in, the navigation industry is also a really big component of our basin. We barge a lot of the grain, soy and corn in particular, up and down the Mississippi River. In fact, it's 45% of the grain feed around the world comes through our ports. So the people in the barge industry had never been invited in to have a conversation about the river that they use every day. So I think that was something we knew intuitively from the start. You got to invite everybody in from the get-go, even if that's uncomfortable.
Yes.
And you got to make it a safe space so that people can have the hard conversations. So we spent a lot of time in those 2 years having one-on-one conversations to get people comfortable with the conversation itself, to get people comfortable with us. And we built that partnership at all levels of government, local, state, and federal, and private, so that we'd be buffered from whatever happened in November. Now that we know what happened in November, we do anticipate some changes in capacity with our federal partners as dynamics of the new administration changed, but we don't expect it to slow us down.
Okay, that's a good point. Be very open with everyone and invite everyone to this conversation, because we need all of them together to solve this topic. Thank you, Kim. Coming back to you. So we have just seen that dealing with collective action is such a challenge. And you from the Seawater Monday are creating some tools that could help to manage that. Can you tell us more about it? Maybe the Action Hub, or some other tools that you are creating to help the world to deal with this?
I love to. I also just snaps to everything Kim was just saying. I also would love to maybe circle back, or whenever it makes sense, but thinking about collective action in this topic from a corporate perspective as well, and what it means to engage in the interests of engaging different types of corporate groups and levels as well. I think that's something, as the CEO Water Mandate, why we love partnering with groups like Kim's, the America's Watershed Initiative, is because we don't think about the public sector every day. Those aren't our common, or our normal stakeholders as our members are in corporate. So it's always really interesting for me to hear about the answers and the thoughtfulness around collective action from the public sector, while I'm often thinking about the private sector audience. But regardless, the tools, I think, are still trying to kind of bridge the same types of gaps that Kim just brought up as well. I think really what it means to support collective action is being able to facilitate really the connections between companies and other companies, and also companies and other partners, public and NGOs. And and they're implementing the project implementers. So, I mean, collective action means, or tools for that would be those connecting type tools, ones that are able to really identify kind of the highest potential, the highest impact type of interventions that these partners, especially for us, the companies, can invest in to make a difference in their basins and really start moving toward those high impact outcomes for the larger watershed. So we've been switching between watershed and basin, but I think we're using it synonymously.
Yes, at this point.
Yeah, at this point I am like switching between two different languages. And then I would say the other piece of a really important or a support tool for collective action is actually going to be those monitoring and reporting tools that make it possible to track impact at a larger, not both a collective and also a larger scale than we've seen before. So I think right now there are still questions that are hard to answer for each of those. Knowing where to act and how to act has been hard to determine, especially for corporates and also for other partners. A lot of the tools that we see right now are siloed or just not really that well used or well kept up. And then, as we keep saying, but the impact measurement at the scale of a basin or a watershed really don't exist. So that's the kind of work that we have been working on, and very lucky to be a part of a team that has a full-time technology director. Todd Player has just been doing fabulous work with his team in development.
I know, Todd. Yes. Very good job.
It's neat because as we think about the collaborative models and kind of the governance and collaboration frameworks that look a little bit more like the relational side of this and the governance framework side of this, having the complementing digital platforms and digital tools to reinforce that and actually make visual and just facilitate the actual tracking of these of those goals it's critical and it's really exciting. So I would say that right now our tools that we're developing and working to develop in these basin monitoring platforms and also as visualized, as you mentioned, the Water Action Hub. They're tools that are helping us understand the stress levels and the quantified future projected gaps within each of those priority stress basins. So on a basin by basin, there's that set of 100 that I mentioned earlier that thank you for calling out. You can go see the 100 basin portfolio. And then tools that are actually helping to determine when and where and how to engage in water collaborative opportunities in the projects in collective, we were using the term, but collective action projects. And then kind of having those tools that are actually visualizing the data through dashboards, for example, of what the impacts are, the aggregated impacts of those investments, of those actions that you're investing in. And yeah, so the monitoring tools. So all of that. And I think one more thing I'll add is the fact that we'd like to see this, and it will be an open source. It is an open source format. And I think that the sharing of and the transparency of that is something. It's always difficult. Maybe one of the more difficult sides of working together. But certainly, we think if the whole point is very much to suggest that these are shared challenges, and to be able to make progress and then work with each other's data and actually, what I would say, water savings in one place, other people need to know about what those savings are so that they can use it to manage those savings and actually apply them to reducing the risk of
having something like that is like a dream come true, because at the end of the day, we are working for water security in those basins, but because we are doing individual efforts, we don't know like the final balance. So I think you're going in the correct way and hope to have something like that soon. Technology will be very helpful on that. But yes, even though that it's not that easy. Great. Thank you, Kath. Kim, we have talked a lot about the challenges of coming stakeholders together into this project, but let's go to the other phase of the topic, which is the opportunities and why people is excited with this initiative. What do you see how can you motivate stakeholders to be part of this? I think that on a way, of course, you always need to convince, being very smart on that. But what do you see in people that it's part of this initiative? That of course they are representing organizations, but can you give us some, yes, examples of how do you encourage people, and what do you see they motivate to be in initiatives like this?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'll give a quote that was said to me by one of our partners that's just my absolute favorite quote. And if I'm ever having a bad day, I pull that quote back out. And this partner who works in a very small portion of the watershed on a very specific topic said, "You have just given me the opportunity to have a vision bigger than myself and to see where I fit in that vision." And that was just so gratifying. So I've
Nice.
asked him if I can use that all the time. So yeah, letting people see something bigger than themselves, but seeing where their role is in itself really gratifying for people. I think I don't know many people who don't want to make some kind of impact, however that is, on your farm, in your corporation, whatever that may be. People want to have impact, and giving them a sense of where that impact will be is really powerful. Then there's a little bit more practical. No one likes to see waste. So if they see, oh, you're doing this, but I'm doing that, and those are actually counterproductive to each other, they're canceling each other out. People really, oh no, let's not do that. Or people love to share. I think people love to share ideas. So knowing that I don't have to have all the ideas or all the answers, and I've got this huge now network of people I can go to get the answers. And we see our organization as being that connector, that, oh, there's a good idea in the southern part of the basin that could be used by the northern part of the basin. We can connect you together. So feeling like you're not alone in taking on an enormous challenge, and knowing who else you can be in touch with. So that is enormous benefit of why people want to work together. And I think the thing that I have perhaps underestimated, but it's been reminded, I've been reminded about it several times, is simply the human connection. And I think while COVID is over in its intense phase, it'll never be gone, unfortunately. But I think our isolation so many people had through those years, people are still really craving connection, and providing those structured opportunities to get together to do good work together versus you trying to figure out what those relationships might be. We're providing that space to be together in person, to create solutions together that I think people really crave. You know, we're all on virtual today, but I think if we could all be together in the room, it would be a different dynamic. And I think people really crave those opportunities. So let's see if there's the ability to address the other motivating factor is ability to address complex issues. The issues you're dealing with in water are so challenging and so hard to get a handle on. Knowing you have other partners that you can brainstorm with, and maybe I've got a piece of the solution, but this other person has the companion piece that will make it much more scalable. So feeling like you're not in this all alone, toiling away, trying to come up with your perfect solution, but you can work with others to create that bigger solution. So I think we have many motivating factors.
Great. And I think that most of them are coming back to the essential of human being, which is talk to each other, which is something that we have really lost because of the difference, because most of the democracy platforms today are not presenting a safe place to talk to the other. So yes, I think what you have said so basic but deep at the same time, that thank you for that. And Kath, how do you see corporates on that point? We
Mhm.
know that in the market, corporates are competing each other, like they need to sell
Mm.
and they want to sell more than the competition. But in water, it doesn't work that way because if a watershed gets dry, it's a problem for all the ones that have operations there. Do you see that corporates are already, like going through this challenge together with this
Mm.
collaborative mindset? Or do you think that we still have a long way to go through?
Mm. Well, no, it's so well said. And actually, one of the reasons I like water so much, or like working in the water space, is because it demands working together. And I like Kim like relationship, and I like unifying topics to common denominators. And I think water truly is one of those. And I do think that corporates are all in different journeys in that, but they do all use water in some way or another. So that's just baseline thought and answer to that. I think that in terms of kind of what we work uh, to helping kind of the realization that we like to bring corporates to is that um, their water balance, the input and output is connected to a larger equation.
Mhm.
So even if they do a beautiful job and perfectly balancing and ensuring that they are all cleaned up with their water balance, their water is coming from somewhere. The input to that equation is coming from somewhere else in the basin, and whatever the quality, the quantity, maybe let's even say the accessibility side of that equation is influencing others as well in the basin. So they truly are part of a larger equation than their own calculations. Even if they want accountability just to their own, they especially that input factor is something that they need to recognize that they're on a team field.
Mhm.
So and that's the opportunity of collective action. I think that's really the concept and inspiration for it. So but then thinking about how do you speak with the different types of corporate players in a basin, and I would say you have kind of the the obvious ones that we've been most lucky to work with kind of in the beginning stages of these of this journey. So those are kind of the high water consumers within a basin that are very aware of the existential risk that they're exposed to in that basin. So that's a driver, of course, for them. If you're a large water user in the basin itself, you're very aware, and you're probably going to be one of the corporates most likely to start looking for opportunities to take action and collaborate and ensure the ways to reduce that risk. But then you've also got the high water consumers that are actually sitting outside of the basin that are using in some way the products that are grown or produced through water in the external basin to them. And they are going to have water stewardship targets and commitments. And that's why we think that stewardship targets and commitments are so important, because then it helps drive their accountability to taking action in a basin that's outside of maybe where they're sitting, but they recognize it's in their supply chain. It is, they do rely on that. So that's kind of one of the reasons for taking action that we use to motivate, and thankfully have a lot of other NGOs that help us, are also part of that motivating factor and helping those kinds of companies get engaged. And I think but kind of what we're getting to the next tier that we don't work with as much, and I think is exciting, especially at the local level, is going to be the in-basin big players that maybe don't use as much water, but would have a sense of responsibility to their communities. I think that's a kind of corporate actor that we love to start tapping into for this type of larger collaborative or collective action opportunity and interventions. And then the others are SMEs. So, entities that have water interests in the basin, but maybe don't have on their own. They aren't going to have as big of a resource base to be able to address, should certainly come up with their own projects or address the water challenges alone. And so building out collective action infrastructure that they can plug into and tap into, and then help them, react to that recognition of of their interests in water, the water resources around them. So I'd say,
we have
looking
like
at them all differently.
stages, exactly, depending on the type of corporate, but you look optimistic regarding the way of they are, yes, dealing with this. Thank you, Kath. Guys, I am going just for the final question, because it's part of Quilimo's job, and it's something that we really want to know about your thoughts about this. And then we're going to the chat, because there are some questions, and I encourage people, if they have any other question, please share it with us. Kim has named many times agriculture, and us as Quilimo have been working with farmers for more than 10 years now. We believe that helping them to irrigate better, to have more efficient practices, it's key, not only for Americas, but for the world, because we are doubling population in 2050, and we have to give food to all that population. So how do you see in your experience until today the role of farmers and the role of agriculture in these challenges?
Yeah, so maybe again an obvious one, but I don't think I named them when I was listing all the people who've participated in our various workshops. But we have had farmers attend, as well as we have groups that represent farmers, National Corn Growers, Soybean Alliance, etc. So we have included them in the discussion, and I think a couple challenges is one of the challenges in our basin is a lot of the land is owned by absentee landowners, but then farmed by lessees, people who lease the land. And so one of the things that we've thought about as a possible point of intervention is how can we change some of the incentives to be on a longer scale for people who are leasing land? Because if you're leasing land, you've got to make that profit. If you're leasing it on an annual basis, you got to make that profit. So trying something experimental or doing something a little differently is not going to be high on your list. So how can we change some of those incentives for both the landowner and the person who's farming the land to think about slightly longer timeframes? So that could be a policy shift, because many programs in the U.S. government that funnel money to farmers are annualized. So, thinking, we think a lot about policy drivers that might help, and so making some of those. Farm Bill is our policy that affects almost all farms in the U.S. So what could we do to change the way Farm Bill funds are given, so that we can really think of these timeframes that are more dynamic and would allow for some experimentation? So I guess that's one thing. And then back to a theme I keep saying, but several of our states have formed farmer networks. Farmers like to learn from other farmers. They are less, there's been some interesting studies on who do farmers listen to the most. And we have something in our university system in the US called Agriculture Extension Offices. So those are people who are working, they do research, but they're working day after day after day with individual farmers. So they build those trusted relationships. So that's one of the number one people that farmers trust. Other farmers, number one. Agriculture extension agents, number two. So figure out who the farmers are listening to, and then work with those, and then change policy to make what you collectively are trying to do easier to implement, and be sensitive to the bottom line, because every farm is has economic challenges that we who are not farmers can't even imagine.
Yes,
Being
and it's
really
part
sensitive.
and it's part of our like a society responsibility because as we said before, we need the farmers working in the farms. And I really like the point that you suggested the incentives. It's something that we have worked very much in Quilimo. We are the first company in Latin America that is paying farmers for changing their practices because we understood, Kim, the exactly thing. Farmers have so many challenges at the farm that if you don't help to priorizar the things that you need, it's so hard for them to do it. So very, very aligned with your message. Thank you. Kak, would you like to add something?
I mean, just reinforcing the fact that agriculture-related collective action or any kind of project, especially that can help reduce use of water. So if we're talking from or quantity and quality related opportunities stem from agriculture in so many of these basins. I think one great example I was looking at, we have the California Water Resilience Initiative that maybe some of y'all have heard of or maybe is familiar, but a private sector led initiative that is between private and public and non-profit sectors that's working to kind of catalyze collective action opportunities. And what they've done, they've set a corporate investment goal to reduce, reuse, and restore 1 million acre feet of water. Okay, right in California by 2030. And then they've looked at, what are the core strategic areas or intervention types, typologies that can help us reach that goal. And agriculture reduction in the context of agriculture is the largest opportunity.
Exactly.
The others, I mean, certainly, there's groundwater recharge, so restore, there's reuse, wastewater and stormwater reuse opportunities. And then there's reduction also in the urban context, efficiency and through buildings. But agriculture is that biggest opportunity. So always, and then, plugging in what Kim was just talking about. So what are those opportunities? What are those projects? What are those partnerships? But just, again, suggesting that, indeed, we're always going to be looking to agriculture for those answers.
Great, amazing. Thank you. Thank you, Kat. And now we are going to the chat. I have the first question here. Raimundo Washington dos Santos. I think he's from Brazil because of his last name. Thank you, Raimundo, for the question. And girls, I'm sorry for this because I think that as North American people, sometimes you hear things like this. And maybe if you think there is no answer for that, it's okay. But he asked if you think that, I'm going to read it. He says, how can wealthy countries contribute practically and effectively to promoting quality and formative education in resource-poor countries? I mean, do you think that the US have any responsibility regarding educating poor countries to face challenges like water scarcity?
I guess I feel like there's always an obligation to share information. And I think we have, a university system. I'm not sure if this is getting to the question, but this is what's coming up for me, is our university system, especially in the agriculture space, has, I think, done some amazing work and is continuing to do that work. So sharing that information in a way that can be used, I often tell my kids, share it in a way it can be used, because information being, I'm just going to put it up on a website, then that requires someone to go to that website and read that paper. So
scientific way that nobody understands.
Exactly. So one of the things that my organization feels really committed to is how do you communicate complex scientific information in a way that it can be used? So I think I see universities in the US thinking about that communication piece more than they ever have, because I think over years and years of, I did all this good research, why is no one using it? Well, because no one knows about it. you haven't talked about it in real world terms. So is that an obligation of wealthier companies to, excuse me, wealthier countries to
Country.
poorer countries? I guess I would feel like it's an obligation of university researchers to the world.
Okay. Yes.
So I'd say yes, and I think it's starting to happen more and more that communication is seen as co-equal with the actual science that was done.
And
That's
actually, I'm
a answer.
thinking out loud. I think you answered the question, and I'm thinking out loud. And the CO Water Monday is not from the United States, but we need to be honest, and most of the employees are from the United States, but you're actually creating a lot of resources that are absolutely open in your website, and they are helping a lot to address the challenge. And I say it as a part of a company that really uses those tools. So I think there is a responsibility of universities, international organizations, but also we have responsibility to go and read them, to try to understand, to write to the employees. I don't know, I didn't know Kath a month before, and we wrote to them and we invited them to the conversation. So I think from both sides, we do have responsibility on that. Do you agree, Kath? You want to add something?
No, beautifully said. And I was going to go in the same direction in terms of data sharing and transparency, and think that is one way that we've noticed. And I would say not just the outcomes, but the intervention types themselves. I think that we are seeing really creative and new, and actually even some old, but just well implemented, water, or I should say like benefit generating type of water interventions that are coming from everywhere in the world. Certainly, yes, also seeing from certain, let's say, Western countries, but also finding them in Southeast Asia that through transparent data sharing and platforms, and others in the Western world can pick up and so I would say the data sharing, but also the solution sharing is an opportunity. I don't know obligation, but I think it is a great opportunity that all of us share, and that is something I enjoy working with always. Yeah.
Very good point. Thank you. Thank you. And girls, we do have two other questions, both of them regarding to reuse of domestic water. One is asking if it's necessary and if you know domestic technologies to suggest, which is very specific. And then the other one asks about the limitation of the treatment and reuse of domestic water. I know that both of them are specific. I don't know if you feel you can give us some ideas. Otherwise, we encourage those people to write us down the question by email, and we can send them to the technical people, because yes, both are very specific. I don't know, girls, if you would like to answer something, or...
I would say I probably don't have that technical expertise to, it's an interesting question, but I don't think I'm the right person to answer that one.
Okay, great. And you took up.
No, but it does reinforce the point that we made before of having a location. These are the kind of questions that I certainly don't keep all in my head, but that's why I love what's being built out through the digital platform, is because the point is to be able to just, Maya, bringing that question and finding solutions to it, like finding what people have found to be a treatment and reuse, I guess, a solution or response. But I don't know those things off the top of my head, and I do look to others, and others who have developed those, and others who have shared with our team, or to maybe researchers on my team. But I'm sorry, I don't have a specific answer for
No
you.
problem, because both of you are seeing like the big picture of the basin.
Indeed.
Sometimes go so deep, it's not that easy, but thank you so much for the questions of the public, and we will try to help you to answer them. And girls, we have coming to the end. Thank you so much for this conversation. I think that all of us are leaving with a lot of insights a lot of new visions of how these challenges are addressing. And this conversation will keep on going. And
Indeed.
I hope to see you both again very soon. Thank you so much for your time.
And thank you
Been a
to
pleasure.
you. Yes, we're so impressed with what Calimo is doing and look forward to working with you very much in the future.
Thank
Absolutely.
you. Thank you so much. Something that I didn't say is that we have been working very hard in Latin America, but this year we have started working in the US. So I think we're going to be closer now. And I
Seguramente.
wish everyone esto to go no more Quilimo. Thank you, Kim.
All right,
Bye
take care,
bye.
everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.